hopefully you got some time to complete all the 3 assignments if you hadn't till now. Did anybody attempt day 3 assignment? And if yes, are there any questions in any of the 3 assignments till now? Do you have any questions? So you can ask. James says, I tried day 3, but for some reason, while using Frappe UI components, they don't render on the screen. Okay. So did you check like other normal components render? Did you check that? Did you check the console? So check the console, check the logs of the dev server, right? Do that. Yeah, you have to check the logs. The first thing you do when stuff doesn't work, check the logs. You might have missed a step, or maybe like you might not have loaded the file that you are actually using those components in. So yeah, try that. Yeah, Ubad says, I tried day 3, but the data was not loading in the list view. So one of two things in local, right? We don't have the CSRF token in the template file or the HTML file that we generate, right? Or the view that view serves. So for that in local, you have to disable CSRF token. I have it disabled for all my sites. That is why I didn't get the error. So if you're not able to fetch data from the backend, just open up console. And in the console, if you see CSRF token error, which means like you will have to go in your site config and add ignore CSRF1, ignore underscore CSRF. So I can show you mine. Site config. And you will see I have this ignore CSRF1. So this is just for development. Don't do this in production. In production setup, we'll have a chat again. So we saw how to do this. Half of it, there were 2 small pieces that also need to be configured in order for the production setup to work. One of them is setting up the CSRF token, of course. Anything else? So for those who did not attempt the assignment, I'll just give you a brief. So here we are trying to build a simple product compared to like similar to Frappe's help desk. So, right, where like this is the thing we use to manage our tickets as well, right? And it has this list of tickets. So you'll be building a simple version of this. So this also uses Frappe UI's list view, by the way. Then there is a details view, which you don't implement in this particular assignment, but you will in day 4. And there are many other features. So basically we'll be building this. So you start with creating an app and a site, and then you set up the front end. For the last time, you manually set up Frappe UI. And I have given instructions on how to do that. Then you start with building a simple header, right? Which has a logo and this avatar, which you can click to switch to desk. And then you implement a list view. Then and optionally, you can expand the list view to render badges in the column. Then there is the create functionality, right? So what you have to do is you have to implement this button click, which opens a dialog box with form input, right? So there you have the title, category, order date, and description. So description is a text editor component based on TipTap. It is also a component on Frappe UI. It's not documented, but I have given you the exact code you need to include to get it working properly. Cool. And then on create, it will just go and create this in the backend. And you can see the list automatically gets updated because Frappe UI knows when you are using the same list resource, right? When you call list resource.insert.submit, it will know that, okay, it has to refresh this list and it will automatically refresh. Cool. So this was that. And this is the text editor components use. So yeah, like try to again do it, complete it today itself. I would suggest. And if you have doubts, let's just do one thing. I'll create a Discord channel for specifically Frappe UI. So join Build with Hussain Discord and I'll create a channel there. So we can have discussions after the training ends as well. Sounds good. Should we start today's session? So we'll start with a few of the Vue features that we haven't covered yet, but are very useful and kind of intermediate features. And one of them is basic as well. So let me just go back to this counter, right? So I have again opened up the counter example. So what we have here is again a simple VueJS app, and it has a reactive variable called count. And there is a function called increment where we increment the value of that variable by 1, right? So when I click on increment, it will go from 1, 2, 3, 4, etc., etc., right? So as we learned at the very start, that Vue.js has two APIs, right? The options API and the composition API. So the options API gets its name because you pass options to the create app function, right? Or each component has a set of options. So I can show you. Okay, let's click here. Yeah, an object that contains the data and methods, we saw that. But why is the composition API called the composition API, right? Because there is what's actually the composition part, right? Why, right? So because you can, so for example, this counter logic, right? Maybe you want to use this logic that, okay, there is a variable which has an increment method, right? Variables and methods, and group them inside a function and use it in your components, right? These are called composables. So why? Because you can have a counter feature that is written separately, and then you might have a to-do feature that is written separately, and you can import and use them directly. So let's write our first composable. So you can write it anywhere, but I can create a folder. Let's call it composables. And then I will create a counter.js file, not a Vue component. We are just extracting the logic out of it. So I'll just cut all of it from here, copy it here, and this export function. So by convention, this composables use the naming convention use, and then the feature use counter. And then we'll move this thing inside the function, and you have to return an object from here. Let's say we return the count and the increment method, right? What did we do? We copied over the logic that was here for the counter inside a JavaScript file or TypeScript if you have TypeScript set up. And I created a function and pasted whatever logic we had, right? And returned an object with the count and the increment function, right? Now what I can do is I can come here and import this function called useCounter, right? Import useCounter from dot slash composable slash, oh, what did I call it? Counts.js. We can rename it to counter. That's much better name. Let's rename this to counter. Cool. And this becomes counter as well. COU. And now what I can do is I can say const. So I'm using inline object restructure in JavaScript. So either I can do that or I can just, let's do counter equal to use counter. Cool. So what happened? Whatever I extracted that I imported again, this function, I called it here and stored it inside the counter variable. Now what I can do is I can replace the count with counter.count, right? and increment it with counter.increment. And the functionality works again. But now all of the logic for the counter and the reactive state is encapsulated in this composable. It's a function. Like it's called a composable, but ultimately at the end of the day, it's a function with your reactive variables and your methods that you are just exposing it. Whoever is calling this function or composable, you are giving them count and increment. And many what they do is like inline you can destructure. So you don't have to do again and again counter dot. Directly you can come here and say count, comma, increment, right? This is a JavaScript feature, not a Vue feature. So now your template remains as is, right? But your logic is much cleaner. And you can imagine you can have variety of these composables. So if you look at the code base of Frappe apps like Insights and Builder, you will see there are a lot of this composables that they have created. For example, use list. They might create a composable out of a create list resource, right? So they don't have to again and again create a list resource and write code for it. They just extract out a function. So it is dry and it is clean as well, right? So this is why it is called the composition API, because you can compose this stuff. Any doubts in this? This can have hooks as well. So you can say on mounted, right? And come here and say on mounted. So whatever you can call inside script, you can call inside here. And maybe say like component is mounted now, right? So if I come here and open up JavaScript console and refresh, you will see component is mounted now. So all of the things that you can do here, you can do here, but it is encapsulated and ready to go. This way you can have, so use feature A, use feature B, right? You can compose different features inside their own functions or composables. So Prashant Pant says, do we need composition API for only cleaner code? No. It leads to cleaner code if you use it properly and using composables, that's for sure. And if you don't like the options API, it's opinion, right? Like if you don't want to create a huge object and then have data inside, and then there is one more way. If you want to go that way, just go to the Vue documentation, switch to options API, and it will give you ways to make this cleaner as well. But this is very intuitive, right? To me personally, this is much cleaner. It is closer to normal JavaScript, right? I can just create a function, and whoever is coming from React, they will find this very intuitive because it is very similar to hooks and defining your own custom hooks. But yeah, stick to one, choose and stick to one. Like try both maybe. But yeah. So most of the Frappe apps, you'll find this pattern, composition API. Okay, any doubts in this? So this was about composition API and composables in specific. So you can extract out logic and the state. I will send some reading, do that today, and it will be much clearer. Cool. So this was one thing that I wanted to cover. Other thing is, so sometimes what happens is, suppose I'm building a text editor, for example, right? So I want, let's quickly build input, or let's do a select element. We are not in FrappeUI world, so I'll have to use the normal things. Option. Oh, I'm writing it in, that's why I'm not getting the autocomplete. Should write it here. So I'll remove the counter. Let's create a select, and it has some options. So value can be h1. So I'll tell you what I'm doing. Give me a second. h2, and let's do a paragraph, right? And this renders a simple select with h1, h2, and paragraph, right? And we can use vmodel. So what we can do is we can import ref from Vue. And for now, I'll comment out these 2 lines. See all the 2 lines, right? And all the logic of count and increment. It's just exposing the things that matter. It may have internally some things that it doesn't expose, or functions that it needs for internal working. So think of this as a analogous to a class, right? A class might expose some methods, some private methods, some public methods. So public are the ones that it exposes. And then internally it might be having some state, right? Classes also help us do clean code, maintainable code. This also helps us do clean and maintainable code, and shareable as well. I'm coming to that. Give me a second. So before we go there, I'll just complete this part. So we imported a ref. Let's create a variable called, we can call it tag. Right? So what tag? Or let's say formatting equal to ref empty string. And then I will vmodel it formatting, right? So what we will do, by now you might have like very clear what vmodel does. It will bind this variable to the value of this input, right? So when you choose h2, this formatting variable will have a value of h2. Very clear? Cool. So we can start with a default of h1. That is fine. And then what I want is, I want to render an element that is of this type. Any idea how I would do that? So for example, when the user selects one, I want to render an h1 here, right? With whatever content. So for example, content. Somehow they provide me the content as well. Again, I'm writing this. That is why I don't put my script above my template. That's why I'm making the mistakes, right? So the order doesn't matter, but I have an h1 here. Yeah, content. But when they select an h2, right? I want this to be an h2. So till now, whatever you have learned, what is the views templating feature that we can use to achieve this, right? When they select h1, this should be shown. When they select h2, this should be h2. When they select p, this should be p. Are you getting my point? What are we trying to build? So how do we achieve this? Using whatever we have seen till now. If exactly. So we can say h1 if formatting equal h1, right? And we'll have content here. Then if h2 will render an h2. And then if they select p, will render a paragraph tag. Makes sense? So h1, h2, paragraph. This is our simple text editor. Very, very simple. But there is no editor, of course. So there is just this option, right? But it works. What if in the future you want to add one more option? So we can have like optimize this using else if, because it can be just one of it, right? Still the same. But yeah, what if we want to add a new option or give them freedom on what tag they want to render, right? Again, you come here and then you add one more branch. What if we can dynamically somehow have this tag also getting templated somehow? right? You can't do this. You might think that I can directly do this and come here and say formatting, right? You can say I will come here and say formatting. That doesn't work. So you can't generate tags on the fly like this. So Vue has a special component which is named component, right? Which is called component. You have to tell what it is, right? It doesn't know what it is. If you try to do this, right? If you try to render this, it will render it, but there is some issue, right? Native custom element, make sure to exclude something somewhere, right? Because it's not able to figure out what this is. That is why we have to tell it this is an H1, right? This is an H2. This is a paragraph. Powerful, right? So you can tell it, okay. So now it's just a matter of binding this to whatever the user has selected. Now we have H2 paragraph. We can come here next day, just add an option H3, right? And it will still work without we touching this part. The curly bracket syntax only works when you are using it here, for example, right? For binding attributes, we have to use this part. H3, paragraph, H1, cool. Awesome. So this was the component. Name of the component is component. So yeah, because it's nothing till you tell it what it is, right? Is. Nice. So this was, might not be very useful, like to someone like who is building Frappe UI, for example. It might be useful behind the scenes. They might be doing on the fly generation of some components, right? Cool. So this was component. Yeah. One last thing. So do you remember how do we render lists in Vue? For example, I have a list of names here. Say, let's convert this into a list of fruits, maybe. Apple, banana, papaya. And then how do I render this list on the screen? Let's do an ordered list. Come on. V for, right? So we'll come here and say for fruit in fruits. And then we'll render the fruit here. Cool. What did we do? We use the simple v for to render this list on the screen. So v for is for iterating over a list of things and rendering it, right? So as I was saying, we just rendered it using this v for. Right? So one thing that you can do or you need to do when you are using v for is to provide a key, right? A key will be a uniquely identifiable thing for that list item. You can have a list of to do that we had last time, right? We created our own component and then we used v for in that. So you will clearly see when you give it a non-unique key, it will give you a warning that duplicate keys found during update. Make sure keys are unique. Why is that? Because we talked about DOM manipulation, right? There might be 10,000 elements rendered on the screen, all allied tags. And this key will help Vue to update the DOM, right? Update the DOM efficiently, right? In cases where it is like updating just one item in the list, right? There are cases like that where if you provide a unique key, it can update that very efficiently. So that is why it is always recommended to use a unique key for each item in the list. In this case, every fruit is unique, so you can directly bind this to the fruit. But where you have objects, you can, for example, you are listing a list of tickets, right? So the ticket name can be the key. So behind the scenes, FrappeUI is doing that when you are rendering a list view, right? But if you are rendering your own lists, for example, always try to give them a unique key when you are using v-for. So v-for and key go in conjunction. Cool. Let's jump to the new topic. Everybody ready? Cool. So the next topic is let's jump back to the whiteboard. So not the actual whiteboard this time, but the digital one. Because the actual one is so I checked the recordings, it is not white anymore. That's the reality of it. So I'll have to probably buy a new one later because the whole year I have been rubbing and I left a lot of writing there for a long time. So it's not going away now. So yeah, let's build. Okay. So why need a router in the front end, right? So what's the difference between we doing the routing in the backend that we do through Frappe and the routing that happens in the front end, right? So what you have a browser, right? You have a browser. Cool. We have this nice browser which renders, say, for example, about.html, right? About.html. So this behind the scenes in the web server, right? In the web server, inside the www directory, we have about.html. Even if you don't give, so 0, give the HTML part, Frappe will still render about.html. This is clear, right? So suppose I have about page here. What if we want a different page? What do? We create a new file, maybe say lms.html, right? Inside the www directory. And then it will, if you have a link here called visit lms, and then it will open up a new page. So it will go in the backend, right? It will go in the backend, fetch this file instead. The browser will refresh and load the LMS page. This makes sense, right? We are requesting different HTML documents and it is giving us different HTML pages. So if you want in Frappe, if you want, for example, /courses/1 or details, let's say courses/details, then you will create www directory. You will have a courses directory there. And inside that, you will have details.html, right? This is file-based routing, by the way. So for getting this nested route, we'll have a folder called courses. Inside that, we will have details.html. So whenever someone visits this route, this file will be served. Make sense? This is the routing through backend. Like you go to a different route, it will ask for a different HTML page and the browser will render it. Make sense? But last session, we saw that when you do npm run build or build for production, right? It gives you one HTML file, right? It was called index.html. Then we renamed it to something to-do.html and placed it inside www. Remember that? Right? And we saw in LMS also there was lms.html. In builder, there was builder.html, right? That was being rendered. But just that, there was no other HTML file in the www directory. But still, when you visit game plan or when you visit builder, you will see. So for example, if I have a builder instance here, let's see. Let's open up Frappe iOS Builder. That's the production instance. Okay, it goes to this. I'm not logged in. Shouldn't try this live, but yeah, open Frappe Builder. Maybe Suraj has changed the route. Okay, he has changed the route to editor. So now you know what will happen behind the scenes. He might have renamed the HTML file to editor.html. That's it. So now if you see, for example, this print designer page, right? If you see the URL, it is /editor/page/ whatever dynamic page it is. And the browser didn't refresh as well. So if I go back as well, notice it's not loading a new page. It changed the route and the content change. So you won't find a page.html or this.html in the backend, right? It's just one HTML file, but somehow the routing is handled in the front end without even talking to the backend, right? So let's go back to our whiteboard now. And what is happening is when you visit /builder/ whatever, what was it? It was /builder. Come on. I'm also sleepy. /editor/ pages, right? And there might be /editor/ settings. So there is just one HTML file that Frappe will serve, right? Editor.html. Then who will handle this routing and updating of pages, right? So that is what is the concept of single page applications. The page that is served is just single. This is the single page that is served, right? And when you visit different routes or different pages, the routing is handled by the front end in the front end itself. So it's not going and asking for a new HTML file. It just updates. So once it's load editor.html, right? Some content came back and you opened a new page. Say, for example, you went from this page to this page. It will just on the fly replace this content with the new content. New settings or whatever page. Does this make sense? So this is the concept of SPA or so-called single page applications, right? Routing is handled in the front end itself. So once the server will send the HTML file, there is no requesting of yet another HTML file, HTML file, HTML file. It will request other assets or AJAX requests, but not HTML files. Make sense? We'll see how we have to configure a little bit of Frappe to get this working in production. But in development mode, we are all set. What we have to do is we have to install a library or package called Vue Router, which will handle this routing for us. Let's do that. Any doubts in the concept? We are going to apply it right now, but so there are a lot of these packages that provide this kind of front-end routing. No? No doubts? No doubts, no doubts. Cool. Let's go back and let's see. Vue Router is one of the official libraries, right? And there is one more called Pinia, which we'll discuss at the very end. We are not going to cover it in the course, but you might see it being used in few of the apps. So let's go to Vue Router. So the website looks very similar because they are using the same theme and all, but this is a different website. So this is router.vuejs.org, right? And you will see what we have to do to start using it is to install it, right? So let's install it. I've copied this command npm install Vue Router at 4. I'll go back, paste it here and let it install, right? So this will install the Vue Router package. And you will see when we go to getting started. Let's see what we have to configure. Okay, let's go back. Let's see if it is installed. Cool. It is installed. Let's go back. Check our development server. It is still running. You may want to restart it just in case it doesn't reflect or throw some error. Nothing changes, right? You just installed it. We haven't configured it to work yet, right? So what we have to go inside main.js file, import, create router from Vue Router, right? What I did, I installed a function called create router from this package, which we just installed, the Vue Router package. Make sense? Cool. So what I will do now is I will come here. So we can do this in 2 lines as well, as I have said. So right now it is 1 line. So what I can do is I can distribute it into this 2 lines. So I'll tell you why I'm doing that. Okay. Same thing, but in 2 lines. So if you jump back quickly to the documentation, you will see it calls the create router, provides it a key called history. We'll discuss that, and routes, right? And then it says use this router, right? We are telling our Vue app to use this router, the Vue router that we created. So let's do that quickly. So I'll come back to this screen and I will create a router here. Const router equal to create router, right? We saw we have to give it 2 things, history and routes. So routes is a list of routes, right? So in our case, for example, let's again go to this file. And for example, we are modeling this thing, right? So we have to tell every route that we want it to handle, right? So let's take a simple example. Maybe have 3 routes, right? We have home and we have about, and let's say we have other route /home/about, and we have, what else can we have? Careers. 3 routes, right? So we'll come back here and define those 3 routes, right? I will say routes. It takes a list, right? List of objects. And then we'll say path is /about. Then path slash home can be just /careers. And then path just slash, which will be the root route. Yeah. So we have defined 3 routes, right? One is this slash, one is this /about, and one is this /careers. But what are we telling Vue Router to do, right? We can't just tell it, okay, this is the path, do whatever you want. So remember when you were learning backend, you will say that when you get a request at / do this, when you get a request at /about, do that. You were telling something, right? If you have used Flask or even something like Django, right? But here we have to tell it, right? What should it display on the page when they visit /? What should it display on the page when it visits /about? What should it display on the page when it goes to /careers? It is a Vue component. So maybe here you tell it that you render. So you have to import so let's create 3 components first. So I will go to source. Let's create a components folder. Usually they're called pages as well. So this is one page and this is other page and this is, so you can call it pages if you like. So components can be something like buttons, etc. Then pages are the whole views. So let's rename this folder to pages. I like to call them pages. You can call them whatever. Then you have about dot. Again, the convention is to use a capital letter. About dot view. Careers dot view. And home dot view. Bear in mind, we are not directly rendering app.view. I'll tell you why. So let's put some boilerplate code in all three of these files. Let's give it an H1. So we know that what page we are on. So this is the about page, very simple component. I should have copied the content. Let's copy it to the other two pages. This is careers. And this is home page, right? What did I do? I created three view components. Now I'll import them here. Import home, right? Import careers and import about, right? And now I can come here and say that when they visit slash, you render the home component. When they visit about, you render the about component that I have created. And when they visit careers, you render the careers component. Does this make sense till now? You won't see anything on screen. Just wait. In a moment, you will see this, right? So now we have configured and told Vue Router that we have three routes. And what you have to do is when they visit slash, only slash, right? Which is the home thing. When they visit slash about, use or render the about component. And when they visit careers, render the careers component. Make sense? Cool. Easy peasy. So we have created the router, but our app is not using it yet. So we'll come here and say before mounting. So you have to call the use method. So app has a use method. Call it before mounting the app to the DOM, right? So what did we do? We are now using Vue Router now, right? But still nothing on the page, right? Why? Because we have to tell Vue Router where should it put these components, right? What's the area where it should render this, right? So we are rendering app.view right now. So if you go here and let's come here. And if I do an H1 app.view, you will see nothing is being rendered. Maybe we did something wrong. Let's check. Provide history, right? This is the one thing we missed, which we saw in the examples as well. So you can read more about it, but there are different modes on which these routers can operate, right? History. And let's go back to the docs and I can show you what options are available, right? Different history modes. And there is hash mode. So what happened is if you don't want your backend, right, to try to handle these things. So right now, if you go and tell Frappe to give you builder/abc, and there is just builder.html, right? What will Frappe give you? 404, because it will try to find a builder directory, and inside that it will try to find a abc.html file, which it won't find, right? So in that cases, earlier, what people used to do is, so they used to do this. Append a hash and then write ABC. So what happens is only this pass goes to the server, right? It is not view specific or any specific thing. Only this part goes to the server. This doesn't. This only has relation with the front end, right? So this is if you use this pattern of routes, then it is called hash-based routing. I think first version of FC had it, FC dashboard. Make sense? We are not going to use that. We are going to use the normal, because if you use this everywhere in your routes, you will have hashes. Hash this, hash everywhere. Right? We want normal mode, right? So we don't want web hash history. We want create web history, which is the normal HTML5 mode. But this needs some configuration in the backend to tell it that whenever you see this kind of URL, just leave it to the front end and it will figure out the rest of the routing in the front end, right? That we will configure in a few minutes. But yeah, let's go back and let's try to get our router working. Come on. Yeah, I'll come here and let's import create web history, right? Create web history. Yeah, now it should work and it shows us the app.view because it's properly configured. It's not throwing an error, but still we are not seeing any of the components or pages here, careers or home or anything like that. Even if you try to visit slash about here, it's doing nothing, right? It's still showing app.view. Even if you try to visit slash careers here, nothing. Because I told you, right? You have to tell Vue Router where should it place this component when this route is visited, right? That is why Vue Router exposes a global component, right? Router view. Hit save, and what you see on screen is the careers component because we are on slash careers. Now try to visit slash about, and you will see we are on the about page. Try to visit slash home, or just we just called it slash, right? So it will be just home. Make sense? So this is how we are telling Vue Router that here is where you place the components that I have told you to render here. Make sense? And we can remove this H1. We don't want that. And now this will feel like you come here and maybe you go to slash careers. You have your first router working, front end routing, right? Any questions in this? Yeah, one router instance, but you can do a lot of things just right here. You can have child routes, a lot of things. You have to read the documentation for that. I'll share the documentation. So yeah, you can have nested things, dynamic routes, a lot of it. So Prashant asks, how do we configure headers and footers for all pages? Good question. So what are you doing here? You are rendering the component here, right? So if you have a header, just place it in the app.view file. So as I was saying, I can have, let's say h2 my logo, and then we have a ul li, or we can have just a link about about us. So this is the common part, right? This becomes your header. You can extract it into its own component, right? And then you can have, let's say, a footer which has some copyright information. Copyright VWH incorporated, right? So this remains common. Even if you visit slash about now, see, only the part, this is kind of related to the slots concept, right? This is the part that Vue Router is controlling. So whatever, when you visit slash about, it will take the about component and render it at this particular place. So header and footer remain right here, right? So even if you want to make this even cleaner, just create a few more components. Let's say we go to source. And this is how it is done in production as well. You can create a header.view, which we have done in the day 3 assignment. And let's have a footer.view, right? And we can have a template. And template in the header, right? And move this part in the header and this part in the footer.view file. And now we can import it here. Header, footer. Let's import them. Header from dot slash component slash header. And let's import footer as well. See, still works, but app.view is again clean now. So you always aim for a small succinct app.view file. See, so this is the common part. And then this is the place where the whatever component you have configured will be replaced based on whatever route you have visited. Cool. So there are a few other questions. Let's take them as well. I hope this answers your question, Prashant, about the common header footer thing. Because app.view is still completely loaded on the page. Only this part is, this is where Vue Router will place its content. So common stuff can go outside of this. Cool. Let's go back to the questions. So Gopi asks, so on the first request, will the server deliver all the sub files inside the editor folder, and on the front end, will this dynamically update the DOM accordingly? So there is just one HTML file, right? There is no sub HTML files anywhere. So server will only serve builder.html or editor.html, right? And then that HTML will load VueJS and VueRouter, all the JavaScript that is required. That JavaScript will populate the DOM. That is why it is said this is not good for SEO, because this is not server side rendered, right? This is populated in the front end, and search engines can't read JavaScript for the most part. Makes sense? That is why people go for server side rendering, this technology, that technology. But in case of apps like CRM, SEO doesn't matter. The builder ka editor, etc., SEO doesn't matter. What builder produces as output is plain HTML pages that are server rendered. That is a whole different thing. This is what is the router doing? It is just managing the URL part and updating the DOM accordingly. In the essence, that is what is happening. So Wasim says, what if we do lazy loading? Like, yeah, we'll see lazy loading right now. So lazy loading is as easy as I'm loading them here, right? I won't load them here, right? I'll comment them out, right? I'll come here in inline. I'll provide a function which will have this thing. So now this thing is lazy loaded. We can do the same for about and careers. I was supposed to give it for reading homework, but now you know. So all the JavaScript that is required for rendering this careers component will only be fetched from or loaded from the backend when you visit /careers, right? In development, it is anyways fast, but yeah, this is how you do dynamic imports or lazy loading. Make sense? So Snehilata says, can I check if user is logged in? That's our next topic sessions and how to combine that with Vue Router. And then you will have all the basic pieces to go and build apps that are currently there in the FrappeOS. Nothing much complicated left. So just if you understand the router piece, all of the apps use the Vue Router package. So you'll be able to read their files and understand what routes and what components are being loaded in each route, everything. So the next question is Gopi says, so all the components are preloaded in the JS. So if you do this, then yes. If you do this, they are loaded lazily. So when they visit slash about, that chunk of JavaScript will be fetched. JavaScript, not HTML. Again, as I said, right, there is just one HTML file. HTML is same, but JavaScript chunks will be created separately. So right now, if I build this app, right, not bench build, npm run build, we'll see. It created, see closely. It created a JavaScript file for home, about, careers, 3 separate JavaScript files. One for this, one for this, one for this, and one is the main file that needs to be loaded anyways, right? So if I hadn't done this and done this instead, let's try it. Like, you will see the difference clearly. And I have reverted back to the previous thing, and you will see only one JavaScript file was created, right? So it is optimized at build time. Different files are generated all together and they are loaded, right? I'll go back to this. So in the Vue Router documentation, you will find they always recommend using this thing, the dynamic import, because if you have like 20 pages and the user just visits one page, all the other page ka JS will be loaded and that will make your bundle size very high. If you see, this is 78 KB. For some reason, this one is 79 KB. And then you will see this chunks are 0.20. In this small thing doesn't matter, but in production ones, you might have imported a date library in one of the pages, right? You don't want it to load for every page. You just want it to load on that page and that's it. Does this make sense? So Prashant says, which one is better? They recommend this. They always do losing one. I was not, I was stair stepping into this, right? You use this, but now you know both the patterns on why you might not want to use direct components. Cool. So now we have the pages. What about links, right? Till now, what we have been doing is we have been doing here. And then if I click about, it goes to slash about. Actually, it tries to get the slash about page. So what Vue Router provides is its own link component, which is called router link, right? And come on. Yeah, it requires something. So it requires the to. Where to? Where do you want to go? So I want to go to slash about. And now if you see, oh, I don't, the server has stopped. Okay, we stopped the server. We are, so slash about should have worked. That's what I was thinking. It works, but notice the page refresh, right? So when I go to slash careers, it refreshes the whole page. We don't want that. We want it to feel like a single page application because it is the single page application. That is why this thing comes in. And for some reason, we are not getting the header to render. There are no errors in the console. Oh, we didn't put any text here. Go to about. See, now if I click this, you will see browser doesn't refresh and the route changed. Awesome, right? We can add as many links as we want. So we'll add this link not in the, let's add it to careers page. And then in the about, I will add a link to, let's say, go to careers. Yeah, nice. So now I can go to careers, come back to about, go to careers, come back to about. So this is how you do links in single page applications, right? You are using router link that is provided by the Vue Router package, and that makes sure it doesn't reload the whole browser or request the HTML file again, right? Cool. So Wasim asked what is the importance of name, right? Now we are coming to that. So what happens tomorrow, right? Your product manager comes in and or the CEO comes in, right? And he says, no, let's not do slash careers, right? Let's the route should be slash jobs. Okay. Make sure you go and fix this and push it to production by today. What will you do? You will come here, you will find every place where this route is written as careers. You will maybe global search and you might do or replace some other stuff while doing this. So you will have to find every occurrence of slash careers. So you will have to start at this place. You will change careers to jobs. Everywhere you are using this route. Because if you don't, right, if you just change this here and you forget to change it here, right? Doesn't render any component because it doesn't find it. It's kind of a 404, right? Because this slash careers no longer exists. It has become slash jobs. For this cases, right, where you don't want to depend or where you don't want your links to depend on the exact route, you can give each route a name, right? A unique name. So I can come here and say name career. This is not the route, this is the name. Let's give it this name as well. Let's call it home. Let's give this name as well. Let's call it about, right? I gave them a unique name. And now instead of referring to the path, right, I can come here and instead of giving to a string, I will give it an object. So we'll have to do vbind because we are giving it a dynamic object. And I will say name careers, right? Let's see if it works. It works. And now if your CEO comes in and says change it to jobs, sure, I will go to my router configuration and it is jobs already. See, right? You just have to change it at one place. So you're not depending on the exact hard-coded route, but the name. And name is an internal thing. But this is a thing where you visit in the URL bar, right? So Yusuf says like Django URL. Yeah. So in Django, there is a thing called URL and name, right? So you have given this route a name of its own. So internally you can, and we can do the same in careers and say visit. So we have to give it an object, not a string. And its name should be about, right? So now our routing works. And that too, this links don't depend on the URL. This you can't do with href. Haha. That is why this component is magical. And once we jump into the FrappeUI project, we'll again do the router thing and everything. So you will get an idea. Cool. Any doubts? So this was Vue Router. There are more things. For example, if you want your dynamic navigation to happen, right? On a click of a button, you want to visit slash careers. So for example, let's cover that too before we go. Maybe in the header. I'll go in the header component and I will create a button here, right? Go to, what is the other page? Home, right? Go to home. And on click of it, you want to go home, right? So Vue exposes or the Vue router exposes uh, uh, what just happened? Some composables that you can use. How you can guess it is a composable? It has the prefix use. Use router, right? And then you can use this and then at click, you can say router dot. There are other, like, it has TypeScript support, so you can see that you can do a lot of things. So we want to push a new route. So let's push, and you can give it an object. Let's give it a name of home. We are not doing hard-coded URLs, right? This have its own benefits. So now if I click on go to home, it will go to home. Make sense? So this is how you can do routing dynamically. So this can be useful, right? I think we'll use this in our project as well. So for example, you created a new ticket and you want the user to be routed to the ticket page on success, right? So you can imagine that you might use this in some function somewhere, that on success, you want the user to be router.push to some newly created ticket page, right? Make sense? This is like routing through script. Router link is for like when they click on it, it navigates. This is through programmatically. So you will find this in the programmatic navigation section of the Vue Router documentation. So I think it will take less than an hour for you to read all the essential pages of Vue Router. So that will be 2 days reading. Read all the essential pages. I'll share the links of Vue Router today itself. Cool. There's one more thing that I didn't cover that I think we should cover, even if that may lead to yet another session. That's okay with you. But that is the dynamic route thing, right? So how do you implement something like, let's not give it a name for now. So I want to implement what Builder has implemented for some reason, right? Editor slash page 1, or let's do 1, and then editor slash 2. So you can imagine, right? This can be name of the doc, right? And this is dynamic part. So you can't go and say, okay, create pages for each of this, right? You can't go and in the router say this is one route, and then when they create a new ticket, you go and deploy a new instance of your application. No, no, right? No. This is the dynamic part. So there should be a way to handle it, right? So here we can come and we can have, let's say, slash editor slash colon ID. So what this will do is this Vue router will know that this is a dynamic part and this can change, right? So this can be 1, 2, or anything. And then we render a component. For now, let's render, I will reuse the about page for this. Cool. Let's go to slash editor slash 1. You will see we are in about. If you slash editor slash 2, again you will be in about, because this one is catching all those wherever there is slash editor and slash something, right? But how do we access this ID? Because we have to load it from the backend, right? In this page, if I want to access this, again, as I said, right, composables. So import use route, right? Or root, whatever you want to call it, route, how I call it route, use route. So this will give you access to the current route and anything that is related to it. So I will just render it here as JSON. Root dot params. This will give you the root params. And let's make sure it is formatted and p tag. Yeah. You will see ID 2. You get it as an object, right? So whatever you pass in here, let's say 8, you get it 8. This is called route params. Make sense? This was the last topic in Vue Router. Wrap up, wrap up. And whatever we will see, we'll get practice when we are building the actual project. Does this make sense? So now in your whatever, maybe this is your tickets page, right? That you have to do. Remember, in your tickets page, you can come here and say whenever this component is mounted. Now it is useful, right? Because you never know when the route will be totally mounted or activated. You can say load route dot params dot id, right? Ticket from backend. Makes sense? So some patterns that you will find. And there are like limited number of patterns that can help you do a lot of CRUD things. If this is confusing you, then this is this thing, 8. So whatever param you give here, 10, right, will give you 10 here. Make sense? Cool, cool, cool. So since now you understand composable, you might know that, okay, params object might be a reactive thing behind the scene, right? Yeah, cool. Close, 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 close. Everything is closed. Let's go to the whiteboard and start a project from scratch. This will be the final project of this training, right? I hope we'll get to cover a lot of what we learned, right? And you will learn on mounted, like when it is. Now I understand how it is. Yeah, there is on mounted. There are like other routes as well, other hooks as well, on unmounted, right? A lot of them. So cool. So what I will do is what I was doing. Let's go back to the whiteboard and let's go to Frappe School for a bit. So now you'll be able to read this code, right? So I can show you. let's do this actually. Till Frappe School is loading for some reason. I will show you. Wait, github.com/builder. I might have it on my local as well, but let's use the web editor. I'll show you the router. By the way, like I closed it off, but if your router file becomes too big, right? If your this becomes too big, and it is a good practice to create in your source, you create a separate file for it, move everything there, right? This whole router thing moves here, you export it from here, right? Export default, maybe export default. No, we don't have to do that. Let's export, and I will have to move this as well. So again, clean code. Router related code lives in its own file, and then I will just import router. Tada, much cleaner. So now whenever you come to your editor and you want to directly jump to your router configuration, you just jump to the router file and do stuff here. Awesome. Now it's time to close finally. Yeah, let's go back and see if builder has, where is, yeah, front end, source. See, it has pages, components, it has separate folder for data, utilities. Router.ts, see? It uses TypeScript, but you will see some common stuff like create router, create web history, and it has some other validations which we will learn about. But at the end of the day, see this. There is a list of routes, page, and dynamic page ID, right? And it is also on the fly importing, so lazy loading. And before enter are some hooks that VueRouter provides. So before they visit the page, do something, right? Validate something. That is what it is doing. So we'll learn about that. Cool, cool, cool. Let's go back. But now you should be able to read a lot of code in a lot of apps. Oh, this crossed 1,000 enrollments. Nice. Yeah. So what I was doing is to go to badges and yeah. So this was the project that we were going to build, right? Which was promised to you when you enrolled. So we're building a small e-commerce store to sell merchandise or whatever we'll see. We'll have a product listing page. So let's try to draw some wireframes. So it's always starter, wireframe or sketches, right? Not directly jump into the code and do stuff. We'll have a product listing page. Cool. Products. Product. So now, by now you all know that how e-commerce sites look these days, but there will be a products place. So maybe let's render it at slash store. So we'll generate store.html and slash products, right? This will be one page. I'm just rough wireframing all the pages that we'll need. Cart. So cart, we have two options. Either we can make it a dialog that when they click on the cart button, a dialog box opens with the card and they can check out. Or we can have a separate cart page, or we have a floating thing. But what should we go? What should we do? Like this sorts of decision also you have to make. Hmm. Hmm. How will the card look better? I mean, we can use slash card. Dialog is fine. Let's do dialog. So in any page, you will have a header, right? Logo, cart icon, right? I'm not able to draw a cart icon, but let's write this is a cart icon. And on click, it opens up a dialog with all your items. Nice, right? Let's go back. Checkout form. So that will be a separate page, right? This will be a dialog. So I don't want to create a separate cart page as of now. So there is one reason it might complicate stuff for what we are building right now. We don't need a separate page, and uh, like from anywhere you should be able to just view the cart, right? And then close it off. That's my opinion, at least. Your call, right? Your depends on your use case. You can have a separate cart page and then there's that. Yeah, checkout page. So we'll have a separate checkout page. So from cart, they can anytime click checkout, right? And then you will be able to pay, right? We won't build the payment integration, of course. I've done that live a few times now, so you might want to check that. Cool. So header still remains, cart icon still remains, but now you can have the items and final details, $100 or whatever, and then you pay, and then you will go to a success page. Any placeholder page that will create. So one of the pages we will also need is a page with one product detail, right? So what happens when you want to view the details? So it will be slash store slash product slash the product ID, right? Whatever product they are currently viewing. Maybe they came here and they clicked one of this, right? Okay. So this will be a route param. We know in Vue Router we can define it as this. So we have learned about this. And this will be slash checkout slash store slash checkout. Because store anyways slash store will be always be there because you know, right? Store.html is loaded. So maybe we have a hoodie here. So Oh, come on, let me write. Now it will let me write. Hoodie, some details about it, an image, some details, and maybe other information, and an add to cart button. That will be here as well as here. Makes sense? So this is what we are going to build. In normal cases, e-commerce stuff like this is built using a server-side rendered framework due to SEO purposes. But since we are learning, I'll build the e-commerce store fully in Vue. So you can use, there is a framework for VueJS that can do server-side rendering called Next.js. So that you might want to use if you are on that side of things, server-side rendering. But in our case, this will suffice. So I'll show you how I have used this approach in one more app. Let's go to FOSS United. So there the requirement was the pages for the events were already written in normal portal pages. We needed to build a checkout form, right? So ticketing and payments, I think this is the PR that I did. And then I decided to do using FrappeUI. So it's just one page. I think two pages. One is the checkout page. I'll show you if the video loads. Yeah. So this was the page built using. So I needed a lot of reactivity here, right? Because the ticket tier changes, and then if you notice below, the payment summary is changing. The number of tickets is dynamically rendering the number of attendees, right? Some validations kicking in. So this is the page. I think Harsh has redesigned it, but this is Vue.js, and this doesn't require SEO or anything, right? So when they click pay now, the Razorpay integration kicked in and did the stuff. Cool. We'll close it for now. So let's begin. So now I'm not going to do a manual setup of Frappe UI. I'm going to use doppio, right? Which gives us a CLI. So you just have to install in your local bench, not in production. So that is why this is not in marketplace. So this is just for local setup, and it will configure the proper front end for you inside your custom app, right? You can either go with vanilla Vue React, or you can directly use Frappe UI, right? So it will give you a starter Frappe UI thing. Cool. Let's go to terminal and start. So what should we name our awesome merchandise store? Let's call it Star Merch or Star Store, whatever. For that, we'll need the backend as well. So let's create a new tab and cd into Frappe, start the bench, right? Started the bench, and then bench dash dash site, or we have to create a new site. Let's create a new site, ecom.localhost. Hopefully I don't have a site with that name already present. So till it finishes, let's read Francis' question. Does every app in Frappe has different setup? Builder has router.ts, CRM has router.js. Also, LMS has a different configuration to CRM from sidebar to other pages. Which is the best standard that we can follow? Thanks. You can follow any. Like, I think LMS and CRM, they all will also go to TypeScript, right? Slowly. You don't have to learn TypeScript just to use it, right? But yeah, based on if you want to use TypeScript, it prevents a lot of, it gives you some good developer experience. So behind the scenes, doppio uses a fork of FrappeUI starter. Use any. But this will do more configurations for you. That won't. Cool. I have a new site. Let's create a new app. Call it Star Ecom. I've already built a Star ebook store. Star Ecom. E-commerce built on FrappeUI. Publisher. Email. MIT is fine. Unit test is fine. Branch develop fine. Cool. We have the app. Let's restart bench. It didn't automatically stop this time. And let's install the app on the site. So we are doing everything from scratch. So if you are following along, just follow along. ecom.localhost install app star ecom. Cool. And what do we want? We want to visit ecom.localhost port 8000 and check if it's our Frappe site is live. Notice how I fixed the build issue. The build issue. The build was getting broken, right? I fixed it. There was some app that was loading something and I didn't have the dependencies installed. Yeah, let's take a break in 7 minutes. So as you can see, framework, and then I have star ecom 0.0.1. That's fine. Cool. So now we won't be going and installing Vue manually, adding TypeScript, adding Tailwind CSS, and then manually installing Frappe UI and configuring. Do bench get app doppio if you don't have already doppio installed, and then you will be able to run this command. So it will ask you what the dashboard name should be. So if you name it frontend, it will be frontend, right? The folder name will be frontend. We wanted to call it store, so let's call it store. App name ecoms. Okay, I hit enter early, so I will run it again. No worries. Store. I have to make the DX better. So you will see what it is doing. It is adding a Frappe UI starter right in our app, and you will see it did. And it's saying you can start the web server using yarn dev inside app slot. Okay, let's check the app first. Star ecom. And you will see it added a stores folder, of course. And it also created a package.json file with these commands that we manually added before. So it will automatically configure bench build, right? It added this folder with Tailwind configured, with the Frappe UI plugin configured properly, right? It will also configure the CSRF token thing. See? So in production build, it will be useful. So in production, this will be rendered as Jinja and replaced with the actual CSRF token, right? What I did was I just ran bench add Frappe UI. So this will set up a new Frappe UI app inside my custom app. Makes sense? So whatever we did manually, I have already installed. That's why I said, right? Do bench get app. If you don't have doppio, run this. So you'll see it's, no, I don't want to do anything. No. Right? So you have to run this before you can run this command. So this bench add Frappe UI is a command that doppio brings in. It is not part of the default installation of bench or framework. When you install doppio, doppio adds additional functionality to your bench. Frappe has that feature, by the way. So your custom apps can have its own commands. Does it make sense now? What I did? I just ran bench add Frappe UI. So that will do all the configuration that we were doing manually before now. Is Doppio part of Frappe? No, Doppio is an app I created for making this setups easy. I maintain it. So maybe in the coming future, Frappe out of the box will have commands to set up Frappe UI apps. There is a good chance. So you don't have to install Doppio anymore, like when it happens. So let's make sure we are using the latest Frappe UI version. Probably not. So what you can do is when you find yourself in this situation, just check what the latest version is. I will update the starter. So I don't update the starter that frequently for minor things. Yeah, it did some production setup as well. So no, one has to be on Vue 15, no. So you'll see 0.1.62, 0.1.62, and Vue Router 4 is fine. Vue, what is the latest Vue version? VueJS.org. Let's go to GitHub. What's the latest version of Vue? Or we can do Vue npm 3.4.29. So let's do that as well. 3.4.29. Cool. And then I will run yarn install or npm install. In bench, we have been using yarn, so it's better to use yarn. Cool. So Wasim says, so first of all, we have to install Doppio, then backend bench setup, then install Vue after that. No. You have bench, right? Your backend is ready. When you do bench add Frappe UI, it will configure Vue, Tailwind, everything and give you a starting point with Frappe UI. So you don't have to do any configuration in the front end. You will see what we get out of the box. I just updated FrappeUI and Vue because they were old. But yeah, let it complete and we'll see what we get out of the box. So that's why I said right in the last assignment, that was the last manual thing. Or all of that is automated now. Yeah. Now I will say yarn dev. Even the proxy and everything is working. So now I can just go to ecom.localhost. Instead of port 8000 where I will go to 8080. And you will see what we get out of the box is configured Frappe UI with ping and pong working, right? And you can see dialog works. You can have logout, right? It even gives you some base authentication stuff. So if you click on logout, it has a login screen. So you can again log in as admin. So I will explain how this is set up. But yeah, this is what you get out of the box. Did we do any one single line of configuration? We just asked Doppio to do this and did. That is why it has 150 stars, right? Does something, solves something. But you will see there is one change in this folder as well, in the app folder. And that is in the hooks.py file because I have a git this extension that is showing me that what file was modified. This was modified by Doppio. And what Doppio did was, let's scroll to the very bottom. It added this line. So what it's using a hook called website route rules. So this is for production, by the way, that from route slash store slash anything go to slash store. So this is the part I was talking about. We don't want backend to handle try to handle this normally, right? Normally, what it would do, normally it will say, if I have to visit slash store slash products, it will try to find a products.html page inside a store directory. Annoying, rough, annoying. Line 55. If you get this annoying error, nobody gets it. I even asked Akhil, he doesn't get it. Why do I get it? I'll have to reconfigure. Yeah. As soon as I comment out that line, it starts working for some reason. But yeah, as I was saying, it will do this normal thing, right? It will try to look at this. But we don't want that. We want it to serve the store.html file. Our front end routing will handle it, right? So that is why we are saying whatever is after store, I don't care. Just give store, which will be store.html. This is the part which doppio configured for you as well. So you don't have to. Cool. Production, by the way. In development server, anyways, everything is front end. Cool, cool. So we have running FrappeUI app. Get this running. So Prashant says, why we prefer lazy loading? So suppose you have 10 pages, right? And if you don't do dynamic imports or lazy loading, all of them will be loaded at first, then your page will be visible, right? So if it's 1 MB of JavaScript, uh, it will take time to just show anything. That is why, as an optimization, we only load what is required for that particular page to be visible and workable. Yeah, so Chris says quite easy opposed to setting up manually, right? But now, if something goes wrong during this process, right? Doppio messes up some step, you know that where to look for what, right? You can go in package.json of store and you will see what it is doing. It is doing the same thing, copy HTML entry. It's uh, index.html is being copied to www directory store.html, right? So you can run build and check if it works properly. Okay, so before the break, what we did was we used doppio to set up a Frappe UI project. So it gave us a starter project with this thing, right? With the empty dialog and login logout functionality. So that was not there when we were doing the manual setup, right? So how is it like implementing authentication, right? So what's the base of it, right? So you don't have to implement authentication from scratch for your front end, right? This is not your typical uh, separate backend framework, separate front end, and somehow front end has to be configured to use the authentication of backend, right? So these are not two separate servers doing auth and web serving. It's the same server, the same site, right? So when we said like we are proxying ecom dot localhost 8080 slash any requests like API and anything to 8000, which is this server which is running on the bench, right? And since the site name is same, right? Doesn't matter the port, but the site name is same. The cookies, right? So the authentication on Frappe is based on cookies are the same. So if you open up JavaScript console right now, uh, we actually want to open up application and see the cookies for this. You will see this cookies. Nah, we didn't set it in our dev server, right? Where are they coming from? Where is the logout login happening? So this is where the proxying is coming in, right? Front end is making the login logout request to the backend. So if right now, if I click logout, you will see that all the cookies got cleared. We got logged out. And this logout is, if I move it a little up, this logout is a post request to the backend. And then backend cleared it here as well. So it doesn't matter if you are on 8080 or 8000, login, logout The session is the same. This is called the session, right? Like login session. So when you enter your password, a session is created and these cookies are set, right? On the backend. This is still Frappe ka auth system. Nothing new. So right now I'm logged in as administrator, right? So whatever user you are logged in as, you will get his or her information in the cookies. So if you can somehow read the cookies, you will be able to tell in your front end that, yeah, I am logged in. Yeah, I am logged out. Don't let them visit this page if they are not logged in. So we'll use these cookies that are set by Frappe backend to make whatever we want or apply permissions or authorization in our front end. So we'll see how in the starter it is being done. So let's do this. I think we will move VS Code a bit here and this here. Okay, nice. So I'll come here and I will go into, where do we start? If you see main.js, it has imported some stuff, configured our resources, fetching and everything that we did manually. So app.component, you might see this, right? Yeah, we have not seen this yet. So what this is doing is this is saying, this is registering a component globally. So if you go into app.view, right, there is this router view. So it out of the box configured Vue Router for us. Nice. And then there is router.js and there are two components. You will see home and login. So let's visit home.view. Now you will be able to read this. And you see we are using the button component, but we are not importing it here. Why? Because this registers the button component globally. So you don't have to import in again and again. Maybe there is some component that is very common. You don't want to import it again and again in all of the components, right? So you can register global components like this. App.component, the name of the component as string and the component itself, which we have imported from FrappeUI here. Does this make sense? So out of the box, button, card and input are globally registered. So we don't have to import it again and again because button is so common component. That is why. Card is also common. Card is not documented on frappeui.com, but we'll use it in this one. Then it sets some config. It uses the resources plugin and so on and so forth. I don't think the resources plugin is required anymore. And let's check. Again, as I said, right, whenever you are building some app, your best references are the existing apps. So I will use a new window and I will grow this. And again, we will refer to LMS. You can refer to anyone. Let's go to the front end folder and we'll go into src main.js. You will see now it doesn't use resources plugin anywhere. It is importing it. Maybe this requires a cleanup, but this is no longer required, so I'll remove. So I'll update the starter. Don't worry, you won't have to do this. Instead, we will have the Frappe UI thing. Cool. So I'll update the starter so it configures Frappe UI properly. So this is what we get. We get the routing as well. So that is why we were able to. Did we comment out something? Why is it loading? We are on 8080. So what's happening? Okay. Okay. Like we did this thing, right? Maybe we need to restart our dev server. Okay, doesn't work. Let's again visit LMS and see if we are missing some configuration. Did we remove this line? No, it's still there. Okay, wait. Okay, set config is happening first, then this is happening. Weird. Let me just try to fix it. Cannot read properties of undefined. What is trying to read? Okay, it's trying to read the site name. Import.env.dev window.site name. Okay, but why is it trying to do that? No idea why. Did it happen after our changes? Let's go back. Oh, now it works. Okay, let it be like this. Whatever came out of the box, let it be. I will update the template or the starter with proper things later. But yeah, that will mostly be documented on frappeui.com. Don't worry. So I reverted back because other things seem to work. Cool. So what we have on home.view is this thing that is being rendered, right? So we have welcome administrator. So administrator is name of the user. This is dynamic. See, session.user, right? So there is some session object that contains this user. Click to send ping request. So it's using create resource, not create list resource or create document resource. It's using create resource. So you can call arbitrary endpoints, right? Create list resource is used to get the list. This is, you give it any method. So it will go in the backend and make a request to slash API slash method and this URL. Auto true means, okay, as soon as you create, you make it like make the request automatically. Show dialog we have already seen. Now you can do V model with dialog. Nice. But you see, this is the only unique thing that we are seeing, right? This all we have seen, the dialog, resource, ref. But session is coming from this file called session.js. So this was, again, it came out of the box with FrappeUI starter. So it's using the router and computed and reactive. It's using create resource. It's using some user resource. But the main function to focus here is this session user, right? So this function reads the cookies that we were seeing right now in application. This cookies, right? And from there, it is searching for user ID, right? Which is administrator in this case. So let's grow this a bit. So see, user ID administrator. And in case the user is not logged in, it will be guest, right? So in the backend as well, when you are writing some server-side code, you can check if frappe.session.user equal guest to see if they are logged in or not, right? In this case, if they are guest, session user is null, means nobody is logged in, right? Otherwise, it returns the session user. So this is the part which, if you call, right, it will tell you whether they are logged in or not. Makes sense? This piece makes sense? Where it is being used, we'll see, but it is just reading the cookies and returning if there is a user. Otherwise, it returns null if there is no one logged in. Makes sense? And if you see, I'm not importing session user. If I were to, I can session user and I can directly do this here and it will still be administrator. See, because it's just reading this cookie and giving it to us. So if this cookie is not guessed, then we are all set, right? We are logged in. So let's check what session is. Session is a reactive object. We now know that, okay, this reactive thing exists. Login is a resource. Logout is a resource. So these are methods you can say that one will help you log into the backend. One will help you log out. User is session user. So basically this is session.user is actually whatever we are getting from the cookie. Nice. Is logged in is a computed. So you will see what are we doing here. So I'm explaining this to you. You can use this as is. If you down the road you want to modify some of this stuff, you can, because it gives you the file, right? So you will see it's doing not session.user, which is basically converting it to a boolean, right? So if there is a session.user, then is logged in will be true. So anywhere in your Vue app, you can import this reactive object, and you can, here maybe we have paragraph, is the user logged in, right? And then we can say session dot is logged in, and you will see true, right? Is it visible? So it is true because this is not guessed, right? If it were guessed, it will send you false. Make sense? Login is a resource. So resource is part of FrappeUI, which is the URL login. So in the backend, it will make a request to /API/method/login with email ID and password, right? On success, it reloads the user resource. We will see that. It sets the session user to, like, again reads the cookie. So this piece is again reading the cookie because on success means the login was successful, cookies got set, and we are just reading the cookie again, which is calling this function. And then what are we doing? We are resetting this resource. I don't know why. And then router.replace. So replace, okay, let me just explain quickly what replace versus push is. We have used the push part, right? When you want to push a new thing. I will just make, clean this up, and then, so you might have known that browsers have this back button, right? And forward button. So when you visit, so back button and forward button. So suppose you visit ABC, and then from there you click on a link and visit EFG, right? So when you click the back button, it will again take you to ABC. So it is maintaining a stack, right? So first you visited ABC, it pushes EFG on the stack, push. The keyword is push here. So we are pushing EFG to the stack. And then maybe he visited google.com, again pushed it to stack, right? So it's pushing it. So when you click the back button, it knows where you want to go back to. Makes sense? It's keeping a history of it in a stack data structure, similar to a stack data structure, right? So what push does, router.push will push the new route /about maybe to here. But what replace will do is it will replace the existing route. So suppose they are on page ABC and they visited BCD. So how does the stack look like? ABC, BCD. And if from BCD they click the back button, they will go to ABC, right? But if they visit some page called login and we called replace, so what will happen is this will be erased and this will be replaced with login. So if they now click on back button, they won't go to BCD. They will directly go to ABC. Does this make sense? And why do you want it? Maybe like if you don't get it, just don't bother too much about it. But what it does is it will make sure that if they click the back button, they don't go again to login page, because it doesn't make sense, right? They are already logged in. Why would we want them to let them go to the back login page? A common pattern. Cool. So yeah, this gives you some out of the box stuff. And user resources, right? Let's see where it is coming from. It is coming from a file called user.js. It just again uses create resource. Resources are nothing but backend requests, right? You might have seen create list resource just makes lets us do talking to the backend via requests, HTTP requests. So it's calling this method called frappe.auth.getLoggedUser, which returns the logged in user, some data about the logged in user. So we can check what it returns. User resource, right? So let's import that. Can import it here. User resource from data slash user, and then I will try to json.stringify and show it to you what it contains. So basically the result of get logged in user, which is just a string, again administrator. So this is just to verify that okay, surely the administrator logged in. But yeah, I don't think that is much useful right now. So I'll get rid of everything. I don't want anything in the home. I don't want this. I don't want the dialog. I don't want anything. Our store will be starting from scratch. Even the router, right? I can have a login and I don't want it at /account/login. Just login will work. We might even not need the login component. Let's get rid of the login component. I just have a home page and it will be at slash. So it will be a store home, right? So our store, which is being rendered here. If you see closely, let me just zoom in. Nice. So if I go to app.view, I can add so this piece will be replaced by the router, but this is the common layout that we can add. Padding, or let's add margin 3 for now. Nice. And then here I will replace it with h1 star store. Let's grab a star emoji. Nice. And I will give it some Tailwind classes. Tailwind is still there, right? So piece by piece, we have learned everything that we need to build this. What do we do? Text to Excel, font bold, text gray 800. Okay. I think it works for now. Anyways, we'll be building a header with the cart icon and everything. But yeah, let's get something going at least before we end today's session. I have the H1 now. And how is this thing? For example, this store should only be visible to logged in user, right? So if suppose I log out, let's go to how do we log out? Okay, so if you log out from one side, you will automatically log out. So if you log out from the desk, you will automatically log out from the front end because the cookies will be reset. Let's go back. Log out. Now I go to the FrappeUI app and try to visit here. It won't show anything. So how is Vue Router preventing the user from seeing this screen, right? That is where route guards come in, right? So here, after creating our router instance, right, we gave it the history and you can give the base path. So if you don't want it to be /store, you can call it anything /editor/builder, anything. And then router.before each. So it is one of the hooks that it gives you. So before each means any navigation happens, right? Suppose you visit from page A to page B, this function will be called, right? Which you can write. It gives you three things. Where are you visiting to? Where are you coming from? And a function called next. So these two are variables and this is a function. Next means, okay, proceed. I am done, proceed, right? So let's see what it does. So on line 19, it is saying is logged in is equal to is logged in. We just saw that. It returns a true or false based on the cookie value, ultimately. And then it tries to fetch the user ka data from the backend. So think about this. What this can be useful for is to fetching their roles, right? fetching some more information about the user, because cookies don't have everything. So you might want to fetch more stuff, right, before you can display the pages. Suppose you want to fetch the roles of the users and say only if this guy is a sales manager, display the front end, otherwise throw them off to the desk again. Only when this is insights user or has the insights role user, then only display the front end, otherwise throw 404. And you will find them in the code of insights and builder, etc. That using this additional data, so you can go in the user resource, provide your own method, write a backend method, provide it here, right? And then you can fetch any data and user resource will have that data. So this makes sure that user ka data is fetched before you visit any route. Then we try this. If it throws an error, most likely the user is not logged in, the request failed, and is logged in is set to false, right? And now we come to if statement. If they are visiting login page, right? 2 is the route, right? So route has a name property, path property that we have defined here. We deleted the login page. And if they are already logged in, see, makes sense, right? If they're already logged in, you as a user also know that whenever if you try to visit the login page and you're already logged in, we are saying throw them to the home page. Else if they are not visiting the login page and they are not logged in, which means they are visiting any other page, right? Throw them to login because they are not logged in, right? And if they are doing anything other than combination of this two, which means they are valid, just let them do it, right? Which means they are logged in as well as they are trying to visit not login or some other page. Makes sense? This was the only thing related to auth that we need to do in front end, and it comes out of the box with the starter code. But now you understand the piece, right? So this before each is provided by Vue Router, which you can control, right? So suppose specific set of pages you don't want this role to see. This is where you do that. Make sense? So you are awaiting user resource, right? Once that is done, you can use it here. And I can tell you some tricks if you want to. Here you can say if user resource dot data, it's a resource, right? So slash data is there. Dot roles dot includes, roles will be a list generally, or the other way around. We have to, I'll show you a pattern. I won't implement it, but I'll show you. Sales manager, portal admin. So for example, their role, right? Allowed dot includes, so this pseudocode kind of. So you can check that if they are one of these roles, let them visit this page, otherwise throw them somewhere else. So this throwing is the next function. You can tell it throw them to not found page, right? Makes sense. So your homework will be to implement a 404 page. That's why I'm not telling you how to do that, but yeah. Cool. Does this make sense? So this was like the auth part. How are we authenticating? First thing, check session.js file. This is the simplest unit that is doing the actual checking in the cookies that, okay, there is a user ID cookie and it is not guessed, right? And then we are creating a reactive object. So anywhere you can import this object and you can check whether they are logged in or not. So this is just a utility, global object, you can think of it as, right? The global state of the application, because everywhere you will need this data. Who is logged in, who is not, there's that. Okay, any questions related to this till now? User.js is nothing but a resource, user resource, in a separate file, of course, because we are reusing it again and again. So we saw that, right? You can call it a composable if you want to. But yeah, just an object, not a function. So we, in this case, we will. That is why I'm removing this login part as of now. So we'll say that the checkout page won't be visible unless you are logged in. Make sense? So items page can be public. So we will configure this somehow. For now, I will remove this part, but we won't have any user information then. So how do we do that, right? How do we say that, okay, this page should require login, this page should not, this page, we can't just here do if else, if else, if else, right? So there are some properties in the route that you can define. They are called meta, route meta. You can give an object, I'll say requires login false, right? Home page should not require login. And then I can come here and I can say if, right? I will leave the user resource fetching part. If to dot meta dot requires login, right? Then throw them somewhere, right? Throw them to login page. Else, next, I don't care, let them visit that route. Only if it requires login and they are not logged in, of course. And they are not is logged in. Make sense? What did we do? We did some small changes and we use this meta property. So you can attach your own properties to the route, right? So we don't have to again and again come here and modify this part of the code. We can just come here and let's say we want them to slash products, right? And name can be products list, and we'll create a component later. For now, I will give it a meta of requires login true, or maybe let's do checkout page. So now this will be true, and when the user tries to visit slash checkout, Vue Router will kick in this code. It will check whether is logged in or not. If it requires the login, which will be true in this case of this route, and they are not logged in, so we will throw them to window.location. I will just throw them to the Frappe default login page. We don't have to build our login page, right? Let them log in at Frappe. We'll say window.location.href slash login. Make sense? So now if they let's enable login on this page as well. See, directly we went into the login page of Frappe and we log in, and it will by default take us to desk, but you can provide it this redirect to query parameter and tell it to redirect to slash store. Let's go back and log out again, right? And if they try to visit store now, they will be asked to log in, and then we log in, they will be redirected to store. Not a new feature. This is like cool. So now we have the auth part set up that, okay, home, they have to require the login, but I will turn it off. So copy paste, right? You don't have to remember this, like, but you have to understand the pieces. That's the point. You don't have to remember everything 100%. You can copy paste. Even I copy paste a lot of things from other apps. Suppose I see some functionality I think can be reusable, I use it from there and modify it to my use case. In this case, whatever came out of the box, I didn't need it, right? So I made my own modifications, and now it redirects to Frappe login page instead of the login component that we had here. And we can go and delete it. And I would suggest as well, use the default login page. Don't build your own login page. You want to, you can. Always you can come here and /login. Done. So Prashant says we have Frappe origin site store.com, and for the site created by Vue, does it still have same site name? How do we browse them differently? No, the same site. So when we built this, right? Remember, it gave us a store.html. We hosted it in our custom app, which is on the site. So store.com /store will be the final output. So when you install CRM, you are not like, you don't get a different site URL. Just it at /CRM, it will render that portal, the VueJS app, the single page application. Cover the like, again, might have to rewatch day 2 and day 3. That will give you correct answer for this. How can we browse them differently? Do you want to have them separate sites? That's what you're asking. You will need some additional setup, and you have to disable enable course between them. Possible. You can host the front end differently. Yeah. Read the docs of React. I think Frappe React SDK. They have some example there. You can do it, but I won't suggest. Why would you want to host them differently? Can we connect our items with ERP next via doc type? We'll create our own doc type in this case, but the process remains same. So when we create a list resource, you give the doc type name of your e-commerce car doc type instead of the doc type we will create. So it doesn't matter. Whatever the backend thing is, the doc type should be there at least. So Gopi Krishna says if we had a use case where the user only needs to access our custom web without using desk, how should we handle that? So how do you do that right now? So how do you give them desk access? Don't give that desk access, right? There is has desk access in the roles, right? They won't be able to access desk. All of that still remains, right? You are still in the Frappeverse. So framework ka features remain. You're only adding additional stuff on top of it. Does that answer your question, Gopi? Yeah. So Wasim says how end user will interact with front end only. Yeah, correct. Like, don't give them desk access. Desk access is under our control, right? That is our role permission management. Okay. I'll push it to GitHub. Let's push the app to GitHub. I will change commit. What is the day today? End day 4. Let's uh, create a repository on GitHub. I will use the command line tool and I will push it to build with Sam. Let's add the remote, call it origin. Let's push the commits. So this will give us a Git repository of our custom app, right? This is our app.